Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Study Various Majors in the United States. Today, we will focus on study Slavic studies in the US. My name is Hani, and I am the EducationUSA advisor in the Fulbright Commission in Prague. And today, my special guest is Beatrice, who is a Fulbright grantee and an English teaching assistant this year in the Czech Republic. Thank you for joining us, Beatrice.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Hani. Okay, cool. So today I'm going to be talking about studying Slavic studies in the US, my own experience, what it's like in general, and yeah, okay, so let's get started. Okay, so this is me. I went to Connecticut College. I graduated last May, and so that's my email. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm really happy to talk to you at any point. And so a little bit about me, I was a Slavic studies major. I was also a history major, so I was a double major. And I also had a minor in computer science. So that's kind of like what I did in college. But today I'm going to be focusing on Slavic studies.
That's amazing. Like, can you go more into details about having two majors and a minor? Like, how does it work time-wise? Like, do you have that Hermione something time Turner, or how did you manage?
I was really busy.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was really busy a lot of the time is basically what's up. But that is something that I really enjoyed. I wanted to take like as many classes as I could, and because I was taking like so many classes, then it sort of ended up that I was like, well, if I'm taking all these classes, I should get a reward for it, right? I should get a double major, right? I think that works out very well. Yeah. So yeah, to get into Slavic studies a little bit, so it's pretty much what it says on the tin, right? It's the academic discipline concerned with Slavic languages, culture, literature, and history. It's a really language-intensive major. Most programs in the US have Russian as like the primary Slavic language that you have to take. I'm pretty sure every Slavic studies program in the United States will require you to take at least one Slavic language. And so like part of it is definitely like studying languages. So if you don't like studying languages, this is not for you. Yeah, and so like I sort of mentioned, in the US, a lot of Slavic studies programs are sort of like Russian centric, or like they'll be centered on Russian. And a lot of this is due to the influence of the Cold War on American academics. When Russia and the US, this is still kind of true. Here's the thing. So I don't know how much is changing, but they wanted to train up American people to be able to speak Russian so that they could effectively like study and help the government. Anyway, this is slowly changing, but like due to the current like global situation, it also isn't. So it's kind of interesting. I think it depends a lot on the program and on the specific school. And one thing about Slavic studies is that it's a really interdisciplinary subject, right? So like right in the name, we've got languages, culture, literature, history. And like each of those is its own whole like discipline, right? Like linguistics, sociology, literature, and history, obviously, like they're all their own things. So a lot of the time, you'll be taking classes that are like what are called cross-listed. They'll be, or at least this is my experience, where it's like it'll be a Slavic studies class, but it will also like be history focused, or it will be a Slavic studies class, but it's also literature focused. And so it's really interesting. I really enjoyed it because I feel like my interests are sort of varied in that way. And so it's something that I really enjoyed. So yeah, I think also like, for example, with my own interests, right, double major in Slavic studies and history, I think it combines really well. Like, I feel like they were extremely connected in all sort of different ways.
So is it then easier to kind of do double major when you have these interdisciplinary connections, when even though you decide to study Slavic studies and then you have to take the history class, is it then easier just to take the history major as well because you already do something that's required for the history as well?
I think to some degree, you still, or at least like for me, I still had to like, so if you take a class that's cross-listed, you can only count it in one of your majors. You could count it for Slavic studies, or you could count it for history. So it's not like it counts double, you know what I mean?
All right.
There were a couple of classes that could count double, but like it was not so common. And I think also, but I do think like in general, it gave like me a very cohesive experience because it's like what I learn in some of my classes, I can apply in my other ones. It's not like, I don't know, for example, like French and economics, you have to sort of
Yes.
stretch to combine them, right? You
Mhm.
could try really hard, but like with Slavic studies and history, it was very natural how they fit together. Yeah.
That's cool. Great.
Mhm. So yeah, so what I did in high school to sort of like demonstrate my interest and why I chose Slavic studies. I was really interested in languages. I always have been.
Mhm.
That's something that's just like about me. I really like enjoy learning other languages.
Mhm.
So in high school, I took 3 years of French and I ran out of French classes to take. And so I took 1 year of Russian and I really liked it.
Mhm.
I liked it so much, in fact, that when I was applying for colleges, I was like, okay, well, I know I want to study Russian. So that's really going to influence like what colleges I apply to and where I'm going to go.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so because I was so interested in Russian language classes, I was taking them in college and really enjoyed them. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll major in Slavic studies. My language will be Russian. This is what I'm going to do. And so I think having that year of Russian in high school, like, was helpful on my application, maybe. But
Mhm.
honestly, I
Mhm.
don't know. But I think also having a demonstrated interest in the like the general field of like language learning was also probably useful.
That's
Um,
really cool because
yeah.
in Czech schools, students usually have to have two foreign languages. So usually they start with English or German, and then they have to take on another language, which is either French, Spanish, Russian, and so forth. So they already come out of high school being able to speak Czech, of course, almost perfect English, and then another language, which is three languages they can
Mhm.
demonstrate in their US application. She's like, wow, that's
Oh
great.
yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. I think it would be amazing. Like I think students in the US, it's like we usually have to take one at least one foreign language. And for some
Uh-huh.
people, this is like the hardest thing in the world. They hate it, like whatever. So I think they would be baffled by the ability of Czech students to do all that.
That's so amazing. And you guys here who are listening, who are watching us, please don't forget that you can also list Slovakia, like Slovakian language as well, because we do understand it. When you see it, you can read it. So that's another language to your advantage because it's so similar, but list it on your application as another achievement of yours.
Mhm. Okay. So to talk a little bit about like the schools that are best known or have really good programs, I would say that so I went to Connecticut College. It's a small liberal arts school. And there are a lot of small liberal arts schools in the New England region. They're called NESCAC, NESCAC schools,
Mhm.
New England Small College Consortium. And I'm pretty sure all of them have Slavic studies departments. But I think in
Mhm.
general, all of their Slavic studies departments are really small.
Mhm.
And this is fine. Like for me, it totally worked. I think if I was applying over again, I would do it a little bit differently,
Mhm.
just because of like where I'm at now in what I know I want to do in life, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so like the schools that are like I would think the best known for Slavic studies, we've got obviously the big ones, right? So
Mhm.
Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, Brown, UPenn, the really important, like the most famous US universities, they have the most amazing everything. So of course they have the most amazing Slavic studies department. And they have really good Slavic studies departments, I would say. One that I wanted to mention specifically is Brown University. Um, this is kind of interesting, and it's not really applicable to the people who are going to be watching this webinar because you already speak Czech, but Brown actually has Czech that you can take as a language, which is quite unusual in the United States.
That's
So
really cool,
yeah,
though.
yeah, it's cool. And then also I wanted to mention the University of Michigan specifically.
Mhm.
I think if I was applying over again, I would definitely apply to University of Michigan. It's a
Mhm.
huge school, so it would be super different than what I experienced in my own college stuff. Um,
Mhm.
but they have a really amazing Slavic studies program, and they not only have Russian, but they have Polish, they have
Mhm.
Serbo-Croatian, they have a lot of
Mhm.
interesting classes. It's a big department with a lot of resources. It's a big school, and I think it would be a really amazing place to study. I actually so I studied abroad, studying Russian in Latvia, in Daugavpils, Latvia. And a lot of the other students on my study abroad program for Russian language were from University of Michigan. And it was really interesting to talk to them and like to compare what it was like, I think.
Do all of these schools, do they have a master's program as well? Do you know?
I think most of them do.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Because it's very typical for Czech students to go directly to master's degree education, you know, to get it right away. So yeah, this is again something, guys, if you're researching universities or colleges, you can definitely have a look whether they have the opportunity for you to continue, you know, studying at that institution for your master's degree. If, you know, Slavic studies is what interests you and you would like to pursue for sure.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience now. So this picture is it's in black and white because I took it from our school's Slavic Studies Instagram, and for some reason they had posted it with a black and white filter. But this picture is me presenting my senior honors thesis. And it was really special because it's a pretty small classroom, but literally every seat in the room was filled and there were people like standing watching, which was like really nice for me. And you know, I made my friends come, but it was also like students who were just interested. And so my experience studying like Slavic studies, I feel like kind of echoes that in a lot of ways. I had really amazing professors and classmates and just like a lot of support within the department. Like they put together like these thesis presentations and like all kinds of different events throughout the year that was just pretty cool to participate in, and something like that not every department always has. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of cool field trips. I'll talk a little bit about that, more about that later. And a lot of flexibility. So during my college experience, I started college in 2019, which meant that COVID was like right in the middle of like my whole college stuff. And so I think all of my Slavic studies professors were really flexible and really supportive during this time that was hard for everybody, which is not going to apply to everything, but like, I don't know, I guess it was something to mention about my own experience. And then something that I thought quite positively about was the small class sizes. I think it depends. It depends on what you're looking for, but for me, like, especially in a language classroom, if you're in a small class, you get a lot more time speaking, you get more practice, you get more feedback, you get more of everything, right? And so it's very different from like if you're sitting through like a huge computer science lecture. So I don't know, you get a lot more like specific interaction with the professor.
You cannot hide though, you know, some students really want to sit quietly behind the desk and kind of pretend they're not there. This is not going to happen at Connecticut College, you know?
No. Yeah. So these are some pictures of some of the opportunities I was mentioning. So this picture is me and my classmate Alice, and this is us holding up our notes for our presentations. This is us at a conference it was like a ton of different colleges all in the northeast of the US, and it was in Philadelphia. We got funding from the school to go to it, and it was to present our research for our senior thesis projects, which were in the Slavic Studies department, obviously. It was a really cool opportunity, and a professor recommended it to both of us, which is why we applied for it and why we went for it, and it was really fun. It was awesome. Yeah. And it was also like a really cool experience to be presenting my research as like a student, but also like there were master's students there presenting their stuff. So I felt very important. Yeah. And then this one is just like more fun. This is from a field trip to, so it was like a bunch of different classes, like whoever wanted to go, who was taking a Slavic studies class that semester could go on this field trip. And this was, I think, in the spring of my junior year. And we went to Brighton Beach, which is a Russian-speaking neighborhood of New York. We did a bunch of stuff. We bought Russian books and we walked around, and it was really cool. And it was also at Easter time. And so we did, I think it's a Bulgarian tradition where you crack the eggs into each other and like see whose egg like wins the thing. So it was really fun. It was just a lot of fun. I don't know. So that was just like an example of one of the cool field trips that the department did. Yeah,
that's really cool, because in the Czech Republic there is a tradition of painting eggs, you know, and like giving it to the boys and so forth. But I've never heard about like cracking eggs and seeing which one makes it, you know?
Yeah, it was really silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was also like, I don't have any pictures because it was a while ago, but my freshman year, before COVID, obviously, we went to the Metropolitan Opera. We watched a whole opera in Russian. That was really cool. So lots of cool events. Yeah. So a little bit about some of my favorite classes. And hopefully this gives you a little bit of like more of a sense of like what classes are you taking when you're studying Slavic studies. So first of all, one of my favorite classes was the Russian novel. This was a class in English, but we were reading Russian novels, and we read a lot of Russian novels. We read Yevgeny Onegin, and we read Anna Karenina, and we read Crime and Punishment, and that's a lot. Like that's a lot, and more also. Yeah. And it was all in one class, but it was so fun. And it was also, I think there were 6 students in the class. And it was with one of my favorite professors. And it honestly felt like such like a fun like book club. Like it didn't feel like I was doing work, but I also obviously was, because I was obviously reading these big books, right? But it was also like you could just go to class and like talk about the books and like talk about everything. It was really cool. I don't know, I really enjoyed it, but I also love reading, so that's like my opinion.
It looks like you have to love reading, you know, if you decide to take the Russian novel, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Another class that was really interesting for me was Global Russian. So this is one of this was it was a Russian language class, and it was an advanced Russian language class. So it was like, you know, like most of it was conducted in Russian, which was really cool. And then also like, so the structure of the class was like global, like Russian as a global language, Russian as like not just like something that people in Russia speak, but people, like a lot of people speak it. And so the structure of the class was based around interviews with Russian speaking people who were living in the United States. So people who had emigrated from the Soviet Union, or had emigrated from Russia, or who had emigrated from Central Asia, for example. And so we talked to all different kinds of people, asking questions, asking about like their experience as like an immigrant in the US. And it was really cool and really interesting. And part of that is, so you can see, I put a picture of this guy's book, Little Failure, and that's the author next to it. And so Little Failure, so Gary Steingart was, he was born in a Jewish family in the Soviet Union. And in the 1970s, it became possible for, if you were of Jewish heritage, you could emigrate from the Soviet Union. And so his family left, but he only spoke Russian. And so the whole book is about like, you know, growing up in Brooklyn, but like you're a Russian speaker, you're trying to learn English, and like sort of like culture clash and stuff like that. And it was really cool because we got to do one of those interviews with him in Russian. And it was over like Zoom, but it was really interesting. And also like, this was just because he wanted to talk to us. Like he did it for free. Like we didn't like pay him to speak to it. Like it was just like very like casual. And he's like a really well-known author. So it was really cool. And it was also amazing to be able to speak to like such a smart like author guy in Russian, which was like, I don't know, really sort of fun. Like, or not fun, but it was like, it felt like we had done something, like we had like gotten somewhere really good with our language learning.
Exactly. I wanted to say, like, you speak Russian so well so that you can conduct an interview in Russian. Like, come on, this is such an accomplishment.
Yeah, and I will say the interviews did not always like go super smooth. Like sometimes like people misspoke, or it was just a really cool class, and it was just like really cool to talk to people, you know, like I feel like it was very meaningful. Another class that I really enjoyed was a class with my advisor called Migrations in Eastern Europe. And this was about like the past 2 centuries in Eastern Europe and all sorts of migrations that happened. And so this covers like the emigration of Russian and Jewish immigrants and like Belarusian and Ukrainian to the United States in the late 19th century, but also like the internal deportations within the Soviet Union, all kinds of different migrations and stuff. it was a really important class, I think, and it was also like from a historical perspective really like relevant and impactful, especially with what's like going on in the world today, like especially in this like realm of like post-Soviet studies where you're like, why are things the way they are, like why are these borders the way they are, that kind of thing. It was really interesting. Yeah. And then so my honors thesis, so in my senior year I wrote an honors thesis, and these are the bottom two pictures here. So I wrote about this artist, Yefim Ladizhinsky, and this is one of his paintings. He was an artist who in the 20th century, he lived in Odessa originally, but then he worked and like painted throughout the whole Soviet Union, eventually emigrated and went to Israel. He was Jewish. And I had access to some of his unpublished writings, like his journals, which were written in Russian. And so I translated a lot of those and included them in my thesis. I also did a lot of comparison of his paintings to, he was very much inspired by the Odessan writer Isaac Babel. And so I did a lot of comparing the paintings to the writings and so on. And so it was a really meaningful project, and it was certainly done with like I don't think I could have done it without the support of my advisor and of my professors and of the whole department. So I just think like it shows like the goodness of like Slavic studies, that like it enables people to create stuff like this. So yeah. And so future opportunities with Slavic studies. So this is me and some of my classmates and professors. You might recognize Emily Hackett in the photo. And so future opportunities, you can do a lot of different things, and they're pretty like different, I think. A lot of people will continue on to do PhD programs or master's programs in area studies, in Russian studies, in Slavic studies, narrowing down and like becoming more specific in what they want to do. I think also like beyond just like area studies, Russian studies, Slavic studies, like knowing a second language. And I mean, this is probably not as applicable for Czech students. For students in the US, knowing a second language is really, really helpful for any kind of like master's degree that even isn't related. Like I know one student, he was in some of my early Russian classes. He was taking Russian because he wanted to do a degree in mathematics at this school, and they required you to be proficient in like a different language. So that's why he was taking Russian. It was just kind of interesting. Yeah, so you could go into translation. That's something I'm interested in. Nonprofit work, so working with, especially in the current situation with the war in Ukraine, helping Russian speakers resettle, helping Ukrainian speakers resettle, etc. As well as like that kind of nonprofit work in the United States or elsewhere. This is like slightly unrelated, but I figure it would be important to mention about the law, because it's like, okay, that like doesn't like totally match up, like law and Slavic studies. But the amount of like people who I know who studied Slavic studies who are like now either a paralegal or like going to law school, like for some reason it just like, I don't know, like it's just kind of a connection, I think. And so I think it might have to do with like, you know, the ability to learn languages and like have that critical thinking skills is really applicable to law as well. It's not a direct connection, but you know, there's a lot of different things you can do. And also, so it's like different international careers, like intercultural competency really ties in with that if you're interested in studying or working abroad, I think. But also,
well, look at you now, right?
Yeah.
You studied in Latvia, now you're in the Czech Republic, so it opens doors, you know, if you want to travel around the world.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a little bit different because it's like I'm an American who like was like studying Slavic studies, but it's like if you're a Czech student going to the United States, it's like kind of the other way around, I guess. So it's like, I don't know if my experience is, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's what kind of seemed funny about, you know, Brown, that you, was it Brown that you mentioned that they have the Czech language?
Yeah, they have Czech.
I cannot really imagine like saying, hey, you're a Czech student, let's go to Brown, study Czech language, you know, like.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah.
Probably, but it could be funny, you know? Yeah. Studying Czech at American University.
Yeah. No, I think it would be, I don't know. Yeah. So some of it's not really applicable, I think, like that.
Yeah. That's amazing though. Yeah. And guys, if you remember, Emily is on our social media every once in a while because she is also from the Czech Republic, from Roudnice nad Labem, and she studied at Connecticut College. And then she is currently at Harvard University for her master's degree. So we did plenty of webinars with her, and the latest one is from December about comparing Connecticut College and Harvard University. So feel free to check out our YouTube channel and find her webinar with us. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all my presentation.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So I think that on the last slide, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through EducationUSA Czech social media, or to my email address, advisor@fulbright.cz. If you have any question for Beatrice, she shared her email address in the beginning, but if you send it to me, I'm happy to forward your question to Bea. And yeah, if you would like, to have a chat with her about her experience at Connecticut College, or about her, studying Russian language, I'm happy to connect you. So thank you so much for joining, Bea. Thank you so much for walking us through your experience about Slavic studies. And I'll see you later. Bye.
bye-bye.